There has to be a mountain of evidence in the Idaho 4 crime case. But where is it? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And I wanted to talk today a little bit about the evidence. Now we know from the PCA that when these crimes occurred at 1122 King Road, that over 40 FBI agents were brought in to work alongside Idaho State Police and Moscow Police Department. Now, 4 lives were taken in this house with a sharp-edged object. And there were 6 people inside this house. So, you would think that there would be a mountain of evidence in this case. But it just doesn't seem that way. Now, the cell phones alone from these 6 roommates should tell a story. They should have a wealth of knowledge in these cell phones. This cell phone information from these 6 roommates in this house would tell us possible motives, possible suspects, a timeline. And it would tell us who these roommates were in contact with. You know, you have 6 cell phones. So you take those 6 cell phones and you extract the information from those 6 cell phones and find out who was contacting these 6 cell phones. And then you branch out to those cell phones. And that's how you keep moving out from the cell phone information until you can piece together a story. We're not seeing any information really about what was on the cell phones. We're getting little parts and pieces of, you know, what they may have been talking about on their cell phones or who they may have been talking to on their cell phones. But investigators should have a clear layout of what was on these cell phones. So the cell phones, in my opinion, are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to piecing this story together. Now, another piece of evidence that I feel like we would be seeing more of is the video along with the picture images that investigators used in order to track Brian Kohberger's car all around Moscow, Idaho, and Pullman, Washington. So in the PCA, it states that they used this video footage, surveillance video footage, and pictures to piece together his path and, you know, to basically get an idea of where Brian Kohberger was driving around that night. What I don't understand is out of all of this video footage and pictures that investigators supposedly have, all that we've seen is this grainy photo of a white 4-door sedan flying by a surveillance camera. It's not even a clear picture. So it's kind of confusing that they would have all of this footage, but then they're just going to release this grainy photo. When they're asking the public to identify a vehicle, they're just going to give us this grainy photo. When I would assume that they have plenty of clear footage, if this is what they're basing their prosecution on. We haven't seen that. You know, I feel like there's no real solid evidence. There's no real solid evidence. People ask me, you know, the people that I talk to, they say, what's really so mysterious about this crime? What's really so mysterious about this investigation? And what's so mysterious about this investigation is that we keep hearing about this evidence, but we haven't seen any of it. I get it. I understand they're withholding some evidence maybe for court or, for legal reasons. But you would think that they would release just enough evidence at least to reassure the public, as well as reassure these parents and these families of these victims that they do have the right suspect. But we just haven't seen that yet. I mean, if I saw a clear picture of Brian Kohberger in his car driving away from the crime scene, that would definitely change my thoughts for sure. I haven't seen a clear picture of Brian Kohberger driving away from the crime scene or driving to the crime scene, or a clear picture of Brian Kohberger that has anything associated with this crime scene. If there's one out there, I would love to see it. Please contact me, and I would love to see any type of picture that is clear that connects Brian Kohberger to this house. Now, one of the major aspects of this investigation that would tell us a lot of information would be more detailed autopsy reports. Now, we've kind of got the short version, and we kind of got like a little pieces and parts of these autopsy reports. But the important parts of these autopsy reports haven't been released yet. And I don't know if they're going to be released. The autopsy reports would tell us whether these 6 roommates had narcotics in their system. Now, the coroner, in an interview, stated that she didn't believe that narcotics in their system would even be an aspect of this investigation that she thought was important. She didn't believe that the toxicology reports would be a factor in this investigation. And I disagree with that because, of course, if any of these people in this house were on narcotics, that's definitely important. The toxicology reports and knowing whether or not these victims were on illegal substances at the time of these crimes would tell us their awareness and their state of mind while these crimes were occurring, as well as the state of mind of the 2 surviving roommates. Another aspect of this autopsy that I think that I'd like to know at least is, did Xana even eat the DoorDash that she ordered? Did Xana eat this DoorDash? Was there even food in this brown bag that was left on their porch? How was the food received? We know that it was a contactless delivery, but who opened the front door and grabbed the bag? These are just little things that we don't know. I'd definitely be interested to know if Xana ate the DoorDash that she ordered. So these are things that we don't know. Another thing about the autopsy would be how these wounds were inflicted, and are they consistent with one person committing all of these crimes? Now, we know that Steve Gonsalves, he stated that the wounds between Maddie and Kaylee were not consistent. He stated in an interview that Kaylee's wounds were different than Maddie's wounds. as well as more severe. Now, why would these injuries be different if it was the same suspect? I mean, did he just change up his technique after the first victim, or was it because of the struggle between him and Kaylee? Or was there multiple suspects? Which would make a lot of sense as to why these injuries were not consistent between Maddie and Kaylee. So that would be something that we would definitely want to know. Where, we have a basic idea of where these bodies were located, of where the victims' bodies were located when they were found. But we don't know really what position that the victims' bodies were in when they were found. And that's very important because it would tell us, were they hiding? Were they in a defensive position? Were they trying to flee? Maybe crawl away from the crime scene? What types of positions were they in? And that would tell us a lot about the last seconds of these victims' lives. Also, were these victims moved? We don't know if these victims were moved. Now, they say that Ethan was found just inside of Xana's bedroom door, that they actually had to use force to try to force that door open because Ethan was on the inside of that door. Now, I believe that Ethan's life was taken outside of Xana's bedroom, outside of her bedroom door. Now, was his body moved? Was he dragged into Xana's bedroom and then the door was closed? That's a question that I'm not really sure about right now, but I believe that his life was taken outside of Xana's bedroom. Now, a lot of people have stated that because Ethan's body was found on the inside of Xana's door and that they had to forcefully open that door because Ethan's body was blocking the door. A lot of people are asking, how did the suspect get out of Xana's bedroom if Ethan was right in front of the door on the inside? And I've thought about this a lot, and I really think that if Ethan's body was positioned inside this door, making it difficult to open this door, I believe that maybe Ethan was possibly still alive and was trying to possibly drag himself to the door, trying to get to an exit, and he lost his life in front of that door. So, not saying that that's how it happened, but it's definitely a possibility. Now, one of the big mysteries in this whole entire crime scene is the lack of handprints or fingerprints or footprints. Now, I'm assuming that the suspect wore gloves. And I feel like the suspect would have wore leather gloves. I say leather because I don't feel like the suspect would wear a latex glove or vinyl or a nitrile type of glove, because those gloves can easily rip. And the main thing is they get slick, they get slippery when they become wet. So as the suspect is committing these crimes and the weapon is being saturated in body fluids, the handle of the weapon is also going to become saturated in body fluids. And if the suspect is wearing a latex type of glove, that weapon's going to become very slippery and very difficult to wield. So, I mean, it could almost slip right out of your hand if you're wearing a latex type of glove. So, I feel as though the suspect was wearing a leather glove. But the suspect still would have put their hand down somewhere in this house. There was a struggle. The suspect was fighting. This suspect is taking lives with a sharp-edged blade. This suspect would have set their hand down at some point. Now, it's speculated that it's a possibility that the suspect was struggling with Kaylee on the top level and possibly was injured. And that's why he, in a haste, drops the sheath to the knife. Now, if the suspect is injured and having to go back down those stairs, I feel like this suspect would have set their hand down somewhere, braced themselves against a wall, or set their hand down on a bedside table or the bed, or a victim, set their hand down on a victim. You know, there would be handprints somewhere in this crime scene, if not multiple handprints. And yeah, it's not a fingerprint. It might not be as identifying as, say, a fingerprint, but a handprint would tell you a lot. It would tell you the size of the victim, an approximate size, and an approximate size of this victim's hand. Now, if you have the victim, you have the victim's hand with you. So even if the handprint was in a leather glove, it would still give you an approximate size of this victim's hand. What about the footprints? There would be footprints from this suspect. This crime scene was described as messy. And that's understandable. 4 people's lives were taken with a sharp-edged blade. These 4 victims, they basically bled out in this house. So this would be a very messy crime scene. Now, even though Brian Kohberger was educated in crime scenes and might have been thinking about, leaving footprints, I don't feel like as he was committing these crimes that he was as calm and cool as they would like to put out there. I believe that a 28-year-old PhD student who's taking the lives of 4 people with a sharp-edged blade is under a very, very large amount of stress. And it's a very emotional crime. This is a very personal crime. So it's going to be very emotional. And I don't believe that the suspect, acting on their own, would be taking the time to watch where they're stepping in this house. They're in the dark. There's multiple victims. There's multiple people in this house. I don't believe that he's going to take the time to watch every step that he's taking to make sure that he's not stepping in body fluids and tracking body fluid throughout the house. There had to be footprints in this house. And there had to be footprints in this house left by the suspect. Now, the problem is that next morning, when all the friends began showing up to the house, we don't know if they walked throughout this house and walked throughout this crime scene, and that all of their footprints aren't possibly in this house as well. This crime scene was a mess. This crime scene was a mess. The evidence was a mess. Everything was a mess. This crime scene was contaminated long before law enforcement got there. So maybe it's hard to distinguish these footprints. But I feel like there would definitely be footprints as well as handprints left inside this house. Now, I don't believe that this house was just free of evidence. I don't believe that whoever committed these crimes snuck in and out without leaving any trace, other than this small amount of touch DNA on this knife sheath. This crime is a very brutal, messy crime. Whoever committed these crimes would have been very messy. The crime scene would have been very messy. So there should be a mountain of evidence in this crime scene. But we're not seeing that. I feel like as they were looking for a suspect, or even after they arrested Bryan Kohberger and were possibly looking for more suspects, that they would be releasing more evidence. But is it possible that they're not releasing more evidence because they don't have it? They don't have the evidence? Is it possible that they're suppressing evidence? I just feel like this crime is a great tragedy. 4 young students lost their lives in a house on a college university campus. This is a tragedy. And it kind of feels like this investigation is like this ragtag investigation. This doesn't seem like a thorough investigation. It's all over the place. It's all over the place. I feel like these cell phones, the camera footage, the prints that would have been left behind, all of the DNA that would be left behind in this crime scene, this would all tell a story. And this story doesn't make sense. You know, the witnesses in this, the law enforcement has tons of witness testimony from people who possibly heard things at that time or were possibly at that house in the morning, the students, the friends who walked through the crime scene and were present at the crime scene that morning before law enforcement was called. They have tons of witness testimony. But these students aren't talking. These students don't talk. If you've watched any of the body cam footage from law enforcement that has gone to the house at 1122 King Road in the past for noise complaints and, you know, law enforcement stopping students around campus who have alcohol, underage drinking. You know, these students, they don't know anything. They don't know whose house this is, who's throwing this party. I'm 21, and then they hand over their ID and they're really just 20. So these students aren't telling the truth either. These students are withholding a lot of information because, as you can see in all of the body cam footage, these students do not say anything. So that's a big hurdle as well, because are these students withholding evidence from investigators the same way they withhold evidence every Friday and Saturday night as they're getting stopped by law enforcement coming from a party where they've been consuming alcohol and they're underage? You know, that's a possibility as well. It just seems like there would be so much more evidence in this case. And we're really just not seeing it. So hopefully, as this trial begins to unfold, we'll start to see some of this evidence, wherever this evidence is at. One thing for sure, this investigation is not giving anybody any confidence. It's not giving anybody any reassurance that Bryan Kohberger is in fact the sole suspect of these crimes. I'm going to look into this a lot more. I'm researching this all the time because the evidence really is what's going to tell the story. It's just not out there. So stay tuned for my next video. Like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the comments. Like I said, I do get down in that comment section, and I love to get down there and mix it up with you guys and talk to you guys about your ideas and talk about evidence and different angles, different points of view. So thank y'all for watching my video, and we'll see you soon.